Welcome back to Beer Brackets, everybody. This is a really, really exciting episode. 4 years to the day of ABT 12 Day, we're filming another review of a St. Bernardus beer. We originally filmed a review of the St. Bernardus Abbot 12 or the ABT 12. Second thing we ever filmed ever, December 12th, 2020. Kind of crazy. 4 years. It took us 4 years to get to an actual review of another St. Bernardus. No, because we reviewed the Christmas beer. Another beer in the series of the 6, 8, 12, and the single, the regular mainline series. The St. Bernardus Pater 6, their famous double in this iconic yellow bottle. Man, this is a really, really good beer. I'm excited to finally. It's been a while since we've done a St. Bernardus beer in general.
It has, my friend. And as we were discussing, like leading up to this episode, I think last time, at least for me, that I tasted this beer, I think it's when we filmed the best beer flight in the world. So
is that the last time you had it? Really?
I think so, my friend. I think the Pater 6.
Wow. Okay.
I haven't had that like to my knowledge or my memory.
And that's awesome, because I've had this one kind of semi recently. So St. Bernardus started releasing these mix packs at LCBOs in Ontario here. So every once in a while when I'm around there on beer pilgrimage, I'll pick up a 6-pack of the mixed of all their different beers. And so I got a couple of them just to stock up because I don't go by Ontario too often anymore, and I keep them in my beer cellar. And so I've had the 6, a couple of weeks ago I had one just as a little treat, which was nice. So it's a little bit fresh in my mind, but still, this is exciting that you haven't had it in that long. And if that's a really fun episode too, the best flight of beer in the world, right? Where we drank every St. Bernardus beer. The next day was rough.
It was.
I can tell you that it was.
I think I'm going to go as far and say that was probably the hardest filming session. That
was, I remember when we were done, I think that was maybe the third or fourth thing we ever filmed. So we were still figuring out what this was going to be and what this channel was going to be. And I remember, let's just get the 6-pack of all these different beers and let's do a tasting, right? It's the best flight of beer in the world, all these different St. Bernardus beers. And I remember when we finished filming, just thinking like, I can't do this every week. How are we going to do this? Like just on a random, we used to do it on Saturday nights, but still it was just like, oh man.
Yeah, that was intense. I still remember that recording specifically. So it seems like it was the same for both of us.
It was a good time.
It was a good time.
It
definitely was.
Go check out that episode after this one if you're curious.
Yeah,
we also have reviews, of course, of the Christmas sale and 2 reviews of the ABT 12 or the Abbot 12 as we did. I think you can give a very eloquent description of, if people are wondering, Pater, what does Pater even mean? Because there's a monk hierarchy, right? Everybody thinks the beer monks are it's a free-for-all over there. People think they don't have any structure. People think they're just drinking beer all day, getting sloppy in the monasteries.
Right.
Quite the contrary.
That's right.
They live a very structured lifestyle with a very structured hierarchy that the monks must adhere to at fear of severe, strict punishments, I'd imagine. If they go outside of their classification. But I'll allow it to you. Do you want to explain to the good people the different monk classifications that they can find on the St. Bernardus beers here?
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. And
You're welcome.
And
Thank you.
I agree with you that the monks might seem like from the outside maybe they not be as structured, but they actually do have this very, very interesting structure, as we have learned from discussing St. Bernardus and the fact that they used to brew beers for the West Lateran Abbey. They've kept some of the names coming from brewing beers like for the monks. And that's where exactly those names come into play. Now we know they don't brew beer. They're an independent brewery. They don't brew for the Abbey anymore, but they've kept some of their names, their iconic names. Pater is, let's say, one of the entry-level ranks as a monk, right?
It's a rookie monk.
The rookie monk, let's call it that, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it's also on the scale 6.
Bottom of the food chain.
Yeah, it's kind of like the entry level.
Bottom of the monk chain.
Yeah, exactly. He's the entry level. He's the one that gets you and do the heavy work, and then bringing the
cleaning up all the beer bottles when they're done.
Bottles, and all the carrying in all the sacks of malt and so on and so forth, right?
Oh, the
barley and
the malt sacks,
right? And
that's hard work.
Exactly. And in the 6, if our viewers are curious, you'll notice that a lot of the St. Bernardus beers have this number. This number is in reference of an old way of measuring.
It's a beer number.
It's a beer number to measure the content of malt and therefore alcohol present in the beer. So you notice that it goes higher up, like 6, 8, and 12, to represent 12. Like the higher alcohol content. Again, like the monk hierarchy, we have like the pater, which is the entry level. And then after that, once you graduate and you've been there enough, you carried enough sacks of barley and hops in the brewery and cleaned enough bottles, then at that point you might become a prior.
Scrubbed enough urinals.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Those are
I'd imagine.
Probably.
They're the only ones that work there. Somebody's got to scrub the monk urinals.
Somebody's got it.
It's got to be the paters.
The paters.
Poor paters.
The paters are the entry level there of the scale. So like then when eventually you graduate, you become a prior, right? Like a prior, and therefore we have the prior 8. Again, like as a style, it's classified as a double, still just like the pater, talking about the beers. But as a monk, like you've graduated, now you become a prior. And then after a long, long time and experience, and I'm assuming also drinking experience, when you've elevated yourself enough, you become an abbot, and that's when you can aspire to the highest rank inside of the hierarchy, and you're overseeing all the other monks and making sure that everybody gets their fair share of beer that has been produced in the monastery.
I think we need to either write a book one day or produce some kind of feature-length film outlining our discoveries about the beer monks, because I have so many questions and I think there's a lot of layers that we need to peel through here. We talked about the Extra 4 on the channel before. We found out that this beer was reserved for, it was a secret beer, a secret beer that was kept behind and held back by these monks as their beer that they would, because it was lower in ABV than the 6, which is coming in at 6.7% ABV. But if you find their Extra 4, it's much lower than that. It's somewhere around the 5 range, a little bit lower than that. And so it was a secret beer that they would hold back and just give to their employees, and the monks would drink amongst themselves to not get too sloppy. And so do you think that the paters had access to the secret beer, the Extra 4? Question number 2, what beer do you think they were drinking at the graduation ceremony when they went from pater to prior?
That's a good question, my friend. That's a good question. I like to imagine that everybody had access to the Extra 4. That was just their
it's like their water
meal beer. Exactly. Like, so that is what they're drinking, right? Because it was safer than drinking water. So that was just the intro. And then, the paters would, every now and then they would give them, here's a pater 6 because you've been acting as a good pater here. And then at the graduation, when you graduate and you become prior,
when you scrubbed 1,000 urinals, you graduate to prior.
Then at that point, you get access to the prior. But I like to think that the abbot was the only one who had access to the abbot, the abbot beer.
100%. There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he might, generously for Christmas or a celebration, and he might say, "Here,
pour a drop into their mouth so they can taste it."
Exactly. Here, have some.
Yeah.
Now if all of this was real, it perfectly explained why those monasteries kept being destroyed multiple times.
Yes. Multiple times. It all explains it. Oh, jeez. If I had to scrub urinals, I'd probably tip off the invaders as to what was going on. Well, all right. So they're double beer. So coming in, it's a beautiful chestnut brown beer, as it says on the back, and as we know it is. Again, it's 6.7% ABV. Let's open these up, man. Let's get right into this. I'm so excited to see how the Pater 6 does in the beer brackets, beer rating system. So you know what? I haven't tried a St. Bernardus beer yet that I don't like. I think they are one of my favorite breweries, and I think they're known for being one of the best breweries in the world for a reason. But I would say I'm not the biggest fan of the Dubbel style, just because a lot of doubles tend to be a little bit too sweet. Whoa! I poured out a tiny little bit and exploded to just all head.
My head is not as impressive as yours, sir, but you will see going back and looking at the recording, you'll understand why. I'm not going to tell you what happened, but you...
Why? What happened? No, tell me what happened.
It simply exploded the moment I opened it, so it poured everywhere. Now I'm basically...
Oh, did it?
I'm basically in a lake of beer here. I think it's because
Are you really?
I think it's because we misspoke about the Paters, and the Pater got.
I think that's what happened.
got
You've been
angry.
cursed. You're in a lake of beer.
That's what happened.
I don't think that's ever happened to you before. That would always happen to me.
No, yeah, see, it's because I angered the Pater. That's what happened.
Oh, you did, man. You did. Okay. Are you okay? Can you go
No,
on?
no, I'm perfectly fine. It's just like spilled a little
Okay.
bit here on the floor. It was just, it's all good.
You know what? I've spilled doubles before and I still smell them. Those never leave.
That's
Those
good.
are with you forever.
That's good.
So I can't find it mentioned anywhere in the bottle, but judging by the explosiveness, is this bottle conditioned?
I would assume so, just based on the fact that the ABT12 is, and knowing San Bernardus.
I think all their beers are, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they are. I don't think they necessarily specified on the label. I don't think the
They
ABT12
don't, but yeah.
even specifies it.
But look at this.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Like, come on, man.
look at this. Mine. I don't know if you can
Yours,
see.
oh man, yours is all the carbonation's on the floor.
It's all down here. It's in the beer lake.
Wait, do you have any more for the mouthfeel refresher?
Yeah. No, I kept it. I kept it like you.
It's in the beer lake.
It's in the beer lake. No, but I kept it. Like you can see the carbonation is trapped in the bottle here.
Okay, good.
No,
All right, buddy. Well, Aroma, cheers.
Aroma, cheers, my friend.
What do you think of the Pater 6?
It's
You're
light.
gonna say caramel, aren't you?
It's light, but it's very present. And
Yeah.
I find it very refined. I find that there are very distinct characteristics without being overwhelming, but just enough to invite you in the glass. Raisins, like dark fruit, a slight chestnut character to it, like a glazed chestnut.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, it says chestnut like 75 times on the back of the bottle.
Does it?
You know.
There you go.
Yeah. It's a chestnut brown beer with elements of chestnut.
There you go.
Chestnut aromas.
Okay,
Just making that up, but it says chestnut.
Yeah. That's good. For once, I didn't read the back.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've seen them here, but up in northern Italy, they sell, like, especially around Christmas time, those chestnut that have been basically soaked in sugar that then are glazed. And
Oh no.
and they have a very unique aroma. That's kind of like when I was smelling, that's what it reminded me
Okay.
of.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna go with the 2.5, my friend. It's
Yeah.
not wowing me, not trying to put it down, but just like I think it's a very well done beer.
No, like I said, this is probably my least favorite St. Bernardus beer, but again, that's saying a lot because
Yeah.
they're all incredible. And I think anything they brew is a masterclass in brewing, and they're all delicious, incredible beers. This is probably my least favorite St. Bernardus beer, just because sweetness in my beer is just not something that appeals to me.
Yeah.
I totally understand why it would appeal to other people. And if it does appeal to you, I'm not trying to say that I think it's inferior in any way. It just turns me off a little bit. Those kinds of like caramel-y kind of sugary notes that you get on off doubles just doesn't appeal to me so much, and it's kind of strong on that. Recent ones, I've had a double by Unibrew, the Mode Zit, and Beer Explorer episode. I think it was Beer Explorer 2, the second one we did, and it reminds me of that very much. You know, very yeasty, but sweet.
Yeah.
Just not for me. 2.5. I'll agree with that. It has that standard, like the Father Theodore's yeast. You can smell it. It's got that. It's got that standard St. Bernardus yeasty smell that I think all their beers have. That's very unique. All right, buddy. Let's go in for a sip.
Cheers, my friend.
Cheers. Okay. I'm watching your reaction here.
It's very different than compared to what I remember. Or at
Is
least,
it? Yeah.
And maybe it's just, I think here's the thing. I don't think the beer is different. I think I am different. That's
That's
the
a good.
key
Yeah, that's a good way
element.
of looking at it for sure.
I am picking up way more complexity than what I remembered. I think it has like the glazed chestnut.
Yeah.
I think is the main descriptor. But the moment that dissipates, and it kind of like goes pretty quickly, you start getting very distinct walnuts, I would say, with almost that like slight bitterness that you get from the peel of the walnut. And then it evolves and turns into raisins, and you get this candied fruit almost towards the end. It's very delicate and well done.
Very delicate.
Which I think it's actually kind of appealing, because sometimes you might not necessarily be in a mood for a beer that is extremely heavy and thick. This one kind of gives you those very rich aromas and taste without really giving you almost like a punch. Like sometimes, like if you go with a richer beer, here it's just like very delicate, just like enough to give you a
like
hint.
all St. Bernard's beers are. Right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's why I love this brewery, because they're that use the perfect word, delicate. That is the absolutely perfect word to use. Everything they do is very delicate, no matter what the ABV strength of the beer.
I'm gonna go as far as the 3, my friend, because I really like the fact that it's so packed of flavor, being so delicate and light. So you might not always be in the mood for it, but when you are, this is a fantastically done beer. So
you described the descriptors perfectly. I don't need to add anything to that. I think there's a lot of descriptors you could pull out that are kind of in that sweet, nutty, sort of earthy range as well. There's a nice bitterness. You do get the hops on the taste as well. I'm going to go with the 2.5. I'm going to stick with that score. I think it's really, really good. It might just be my own taste. Every time I drink this beer, I think there's just like, there could be a little bit something else for it to be perfect for me. Now, buddy, we got to do beer bracket tradition. If you have some beer left after you're creating your beer lake.
Luckily, I do. I managed to salvage some.
Swirl it around to get those yeasts.
Oh, the yeast.
Oh, look at that.
Oh yeah, it's definitely bottle condition. I just saw the color of the last bit that came out. Like it's
exactly.
There's no chance.
Those last couple of drops are dark brown. That's the yeast.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, you can see
definitely bottle condition. I mean, you can tell when you pour it out and taste it, right? Those first couple of sips, when you get that certain just type of carbonation, that kind of throat hit that you get, where it's really sharp.
Cheers, my friend.
Oh yeah, cheers, buddy.
The carbonation is there and it cleanses the palate. But I will say that compared to some of the other, like we tried the triple, definitely the ABT 12 and the Christmas ale, this has way less carbonation in a sense, or let's say not necessarily less. The quality of the carbonation is different. The fine bubbles are not as present. It does not leave any stickiness or oiliness, but it's not as live as some of those other beers that I mentioned. That's find
right. A little bit soapier.
It's a little bit soapier. Soapier is a good descriptor, my friend. This might be one of the points where it's, I might say, I'm not entirely convinced about that. So I'm going to go with the 2 because I still think it's well done. But to my liking, my personal liking, I would like a little bit more of that carbonation. What do you think?
Yeah, soapy carbonation. You can see the head kind of like dies down really quick, and then it becomes almost like transparent. Like you can kind of see through the head when it's there, and it bunches together and creates like these little patches of head, almost like little beer islands.
The beer island
in a beer river,
or in the beer lake.
It's very in the beer lake. It's very It's very particular as far as St. Bernard's beers go in that sense. It almost feels like undercarbonated. I would agree. Yeah, it's almost like soapy water. If you put a bit of like dish soap in some water and you shake it around, the way the head sort of forms itself is very reminiscent of that. I would agree. The mouthfeel doesn't really impress me too much on this beer. It feels like it should either go like the thick and syrupy, or it should go more carbonated, somewhere in the middle. And that makes it feel just like lost for me as a body of a beer. So I think that's why I would classify this one as like my least favorite St. Bernard's beer. So I would go 2. Yeah, 2's fair, man. I'll match you on that. So what do you think about the finish? It's super interesting.
It is very interesting. Caramelized chestnut or glazed chestnut turns into this walnut character with a little bit of bitterness. Then it stays and lingers, and then you start feeling like you're tasting some of those like raisin dark fruit. I think on the finish, at least, that's where I find the caramel, depending on how that comes. And that's where I find like this sweetness a little bit more prominent than what I would like. Because the carbonation is not as sharp as some of the other beers, it just stays longer. Again, nothing wrong with that if that's something you like. But in my case, I think I'm going to bring it down again. Like, I think a 2 is fair, like, because it's better than like the middle of the road. But it's not one that I would say, I'm really going to seek that out for the finish.
Like the bitterness from a walnut. That's a really interesting way of looking at it. It's funny. I love that you said that. And that's the beauty of tasting, of tasting any kind of alcohol, whether it's wine tasting,
Yep.
whiskey tasting, whatever it is, or any kind of food, whatever it is that you're really into and you're sitting down and analyzing, while something might be caused by something directly, like the bitterness might be caused by the hops,
Yeah.
you can sort of create this journey in your mind where you get the chestnut and then you associate it with a walnut and then the bitterness from the walnut, and then it becomes that in your mind. And it might as well be at that point because it's just how you're interpreting it. That's the beauty of this.
It is.
Really is. But so yeah, it's bitter. But one thing I really enjoy about the finish that gives me a little bit of a kick is after like 4 or 5 seconds, and I've used this descriptor on the channel before, like, you know, those little caramel or caramel square like cube candies that are wrapped in plastic. I get that taste exactly like 5 seconds later. The bitterness dissipates, and then it's like I have one of those candies in my mouth for like a second.
Yes.
I find that so interesting. I like that. It's really cool how it evolves. It's still not really to my liking, and I think the bitterness is a little bit too strong for what it is, but I'd go with the 2 and match you on that. Yeah.
No, that's for Fred.
So as an overall beer experience, buddy, for the Pater 6, what do you think?
When it comes to this beer and this experience, I think this is a beer that has like a lot of potential. I think it's a beer that is interesting for the fact that it allows you to experience some of those very rich flavors that come from some of those like heavier beers without necessarily having to get through the heaviness of those styles. So it's a good introduction.
That's a great way of putting it.
It's a good introduction to some of the heavier Belgian beers. Now, is that something that I necessarily would seek? Probably not necessarily all the time. I think I'm going to land with the 2, my friend. A little bit lower than the middle where I've been going. At this point of my beer exploration is where I would put it. Compared to others that I've experienced, especially also comparing to other from the San Bernardus family, I think that's where I would place it.
Yeah, I think the intangibles are going to come out really hard for me on this one because I think just as a St. Bernardus beer, the experience from opening it up, the fact that it's bottle conditioned, the fact that you do get that St. Bernardus very particular Father Theodore yeast that you smell right away. It's very, very specific to St. Bernardus. It's a very enjoyable experience. I think their beers have a certain level of quality to them that I do really enjoy, even though this style isn't really to my taste. But as an overall experience, like would I recommend this beer? I'm going to stick with a 2.5, I think.
That's fair.
Even though it's not my favorite style, and even though there's parts of it that got down to a 2, I think overall it's still a really good beer experience. And if you enjoy this style of beer, even better. You're going to love this because exactly like you said, man, like it's, you get like the good parts of the style of beer without a lot of like the heaviness and a lot of some of what some people might consider negatives that come along with it. So yeah, beautifully done. So once again, we got there in different ways, but we have the exact same score. It comes out to a 3.83 on 5 in our rating system, which is an excellent beer. This was amazing, man. This was so fun to be able to taste this with you again after all this time. Let us know down below what you think of the St. Bernardus Pater 6. And whatever you do, click that beer bell because YouTube will let you know when we're hanging out in the pub. If you click the bell.
And no matter what you do, don't forget to close your beer brackets.
Never forget. Cheers, everybody.